Good morning and welcome to this Business Day dialogue on gender as a human right in partnership with Coca-Cola Beverages South Africa. My name is Nompumelelo Lunji and I'm going to be your moderator for this conversation. And I'm excited to have this panel before me, which is going to help us go through this important conversation on gender equality. But before I come to them, I just want to set the scene a little bit. Human rights are rights we have simply because we are human, simply because we exist. These rights are not given to us or conferred to us by any state, by any person. And they're inherent, they are universal, they are inalienable. So it doesn't matter what sex we are, what culture we are, what race we are, what social status we hold, we just have these rights. Now, gender equality is one of those fundamental human rights that are recognized internationally and are in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as well. And so it is crucial for us to have this conversation with that context in mind. Being a woman, being a man, being any gender identity that you hold means that you inherently have the right to equality. But what is often on paper is not often a reality. We've seen historically how women have had to fight their way to recognition of their equality with men. And as far as we have gotten, we are now in 2023, and we are still talking about gender equality because we've not yet realized that goal. And I just also want to remind us that gender equality is goal 5 of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And I just want to give a few alarming statistics about how far away we are from reaching the goal. At the current rate, it will take an estimated 300 years to close gaps in legal protection and remove discriminatory laws. 140 years for women to be represented equally in positions of power and leadership in the workplace. I want us to hold on to that because the focus of our discussion today is really to zoom in on women and their participation in the workplace in the South African context. And I just want to begin by thanking Coca-Cola Beverages South Africa for taking this initiative. We're not in Women's Month. Women's Month is past. We have passed September. We're in October. But here we are having a conversation about gender equality. And I think it's important for us to commend Coca-Cola Beverages South Africa for putting this issue on the agenda the whole year round. It's this 365 days a year conversation that we need to have, an issue that we need to discuss. Now, let me introduce our esteemed panel. With us today, we have Velaphi Ratshefola, who is the Managing Director of Coca-Cola Beverages South Africa. Welcome to you. I will read parts of your bio as we go on. We have with us Janine Hills, who is the founder and CEO of Authentic Leadership. We also have with us Hosea Malekane, who is Group Chairperson and MD of Dijalo Property Group. And then we also have Alan Tumbo, who is a Senior Researcher on Equality at the South African Human Rights Commission. Now, I am going to start with you, Velaphi. You are the ones that brought us here today. And I want you to take us through because you have achieved 51% women in leadership at Coca-Cola Beverages South Africa. And this is not just in the sort of what we usually think of these soft areas of the organization, HR, communications, etc. This is in commercializing and logistics and manufacturing. We have women represented there. Could you take us through your vision for inclusion and where this passion comes from of including women in leadership and what you think the value of that is?
Thank you very much. We as a country come from the history of inequality. And it's important that we eradicate that, not just for now, but for the future. And everybody needs to play a role. and particularly corporations, private sector, need to play a role. Now, our organization is relatively new. We were formed in 2016, which was an amalgamation of 6 Coca-Cola entities that came together to form CCBSA, Coca-Cola Beverages South Africa. At the time, I think women in leadership was below 20%. We set ourselves a vision that said we wanted to reflect South Africa in its entirety so that we can resonate with the area in which we operate. And if you think of our business, most of our customers happen to be women. If you go around the streets, you will see a lot of women selling stuff. Women are decision makers in terms of which beverages get bought in a store. So it just makes business sense to have women in the core of our business at leadership positions. And like you say, not in just the soft areas, but in critical areas, engineering, logistics, manufacturing, all of those fields. And by the way, that's where you test the resolve, whether we are committed. And just to correct you, we're now not 51%, we're 52.1% at leadership, at a leadership level. So we make progress. Of course, there are functions where we're still not happy with the progress that we've made, although overall we've made the good progress. So we are driving to make sure that across all the board, across different grades levels, across different functions, we make sure that we have got very good representation. But also it's not just about the numbers. It's about, do we have the right policies? Do we have the right culture? It's our pay, behaviors equitable to the... By the way, you will never be able to attract talented people in those critical roles if you do not pay them well. So it's a holistic approach, and very happy about. And why are we doing it? It's women in South Africa are the majority of our population. It's a fact. Now, if we want to compete globally, we cannot ignore the majority of the population who have got the same talent as their male folks. So you can't compete with the other bottlers in the world with one arm tied behind your back because of your discriminatory practices. So for me, it makes business sense throughout.
Thank you so much, Velaphi, for that. And I think I want to segue from the point you just made about discrimination, because part of the reason why women continue to find themselves in the marginalized position that they find themselves in is because there is this discrimination, and the statistics also bear out. Even with the SDGs that I've just mentioned now, one of the concerns is that there's discrimination in terms of access to opportunities, discriminations when it comes to pay, equity as well. Now, Janine, I'm just looking at your profile, and you have been a board member and advisor for several prestigious organizations, including Umlambo Foundation, Sawil, Brand South Africa, and you've worked with a number of women's organizations as well, aside from your other activities in the JSC and all the things that you've done there and achieved with other leaders. But in your opinion, why is activism by women's groups not leading to the changes that we want to see when it comes to women becoming more recognized, women being seen as equal, and also being given the opportunities to shine together with their male counterparts?
Thank you very much. I think it's a fantastic question, first of all. And secondly, thank you for this forum. Because the more we have these forums, the more these discussions will touch the hearts of the men that we need to get involved. Yes. I think in the past, and when I say the past, I mean the last 10, 20 years, CEO, I think you will also agree with your journey, is we've had a lot of women's organizations working with women's organizations, which effectively is preaching to the converted. Yeah, so I think which was necessary. I do find like now we've got a lot of women's organizations starting to work together, which hasn't always happened, which is crucial because that gets you the majority of South Africa and Africa working and speaking and engaging together. But what's really starting to happen now, and I see the trends and the shift happening, is that men are now starting to work and engage, and that is, I believe, what's going to see the shift. And so women's organizations and women supporting women at all levels, opening that door, keeping that ladder up for each other, opening the door for each other, creating opportunities for each other, lifting as we rise, as you know, is a common, but genuinely doing it in a meaningful way is what needs to be done now. And I think we're at that stage, we're a pivotal stage where you're starting to see that shift. And that comes from authentic leadership. And I think you're seeing that here today. You're seeing authentic leaders leading by example. And I think that's where we currently stand. So I encourage this. So thank you so much.
I think you make a very good point when you say, when women are working with other women and drawing them into the conversation and the activism, we are preaching to the converted. And just coming to you, Hosea, you've written a book, The Imperatives of Revoking the Silence. And I found that the title of your book very provoking, thought-provoking, because it goes back to the point about men, involving men. Men are the majority decision makers. They hold power as policy makers, mostly in politics as well as in the economy as well. So could you just take us through your thoughts around the importance of the male voice when we're talking about gender equality?
Thank you very much, and thanks to Coca-Cola and Mr. Ratshefola in particular for accommodating this topic, which is very sensitive to a large extent in our country with this very shocking statistics of GBV. I come from a premise where I'm relating to the statement made by the late Dr. Martin Luther King, when he said, there comes a time when silence is betrayal. I attended the first presidential summit on GBV in November 2018, where the president appealed to South African men to join the fight against GBV. I followed it up by searching as to where can I fit in terms of rendering my contribution. Fortunately, I came across a lot of literature and national coverage, especially of Mr. Ratshefola, in the forums where he got accolades from even women's group about his pioneering the involvement of women in leadership roles and the like. So I then resorted to identifying an area where the greatest impact as far as I'm concerned, and I looked at the transformation of our people as human beings from adolescence into adulthood. And that landed me at the university, and I wrote a book which is based at Wits as an institution on the basis that if we can drive the message that is being persuaded, it's coming from the likes of Mr. Ratshefola, to those who have submitted themselves to transformation, which is your students who are coming from adolescence into adulthood. For 3 years, they are a captured market, and they are possibly going to be occupying positions of leadership in society. And if we can, over and above getting them academic qualifications, to look at doing something about their character, the essential of their character, we will have done a great job. And the title is referring to the male student to a large extent, to say we are very silent can we look at the reasons and established ways and means of revoking our silence?
I think that speaks to the idea of challenging gender norms. Because if we don't challenge gender norms in our society, we cannot create that imperative. People won't see the need for gender equality and the need to work towards a more equal society more generally speaking. Now I'm coming to Ellen Tumo, who is with the South African Human Rights Commission. And I just want to read briefly read the mandate of the commission. The South African Human Rights Commission is mandated by the Constitution to protect and promote human rights. Now we've just established here that gender equality is a human right. So what is then the role of institutions like the South African Human Rights Commission in terms of ensuring that we have the policies that encourage equality, but not only that, what happens when those policies are not implemented? And as we can see, when you look at the statistics, 67% of managerial positions in our workplaces are still held by men. So we are not there yet. So what is the role of institutions such as your own in ensuring that we are actually on track to reaching Goal 5 of the SDGs, for instance?
Thank you for that question, and good morning to everyone who's joining us today. Thanks for having us, and I think it's a really important dialogue that we're having today. To answer your question more directly when it comes to the Human Rights Commission, our role is three-pronged, like you've already mentioned. But first of all, we act as an arm of parliament to hold the country accountable for implementing human rights across the board. Right? So we report to parliament and we make sure that the laws that they've passed and all of the things that they have ratified at international level, be it conventions and so on, are being applied in the country. We do that in various different ways. One of the ways is we monitor. So we go to different departments, to the private sector, and we ask questions and ask, well, how far are you along this journey? And we start to pick the gaps and recommend ways in which they can be addressed. We did this, for example, in 2017, where we held a hearing on unfair discrimination in the workplace. One of the great things about a hearing is that we're able to bring anyone, even if they don't want to come. We're able to subpoena them and say, give us answers. Where are you? And we found that a lot of the compliance we're seeing across the board is really just malicious compliance. When you have the numbers, but when we're in this environment, we aren't actually feeling like we belong. We're not feeling like this is an inclusive environment. As a matter of fact, we see that a lot of women are feeling that they're fighting battles. They're having to enter a boardroom or any room feeling that they have to fight for their space, instead of feeling that they can express themselves freely and actually be respected for the skills and the abilities that they have. Right? So what we do when we find these problems is then we go to parliament, we go to the state, and we say, this is how you can resolve some of these problems, right? So we had pointed to the fact that the roles, and I think I want to take a small little detour here. We need to differentiate between sex and gender, right? So sex is what we have biologically. I'm a man, you're a woman, for example. But gender is a societal role that you play. One that we believe a man should play a certain role, a woman should play a certain role. And we tend to think that we leave these things at home. And we get to the workplace, and our workplace is very neutral, and those things don't matter. But they generally do. So when we look at issues like maternity and pregnancy and the role that you play at home, that impacts how you are functioning in your workplace. So we had recommended that government needs to relook this issue of maternity leave and paternity leave and almost equalize the role that a man also plays in the household, right? So that you allow women to get off what we call this triple burden, which is that you're working, you're taking care of children, and you're running things at home, right? That is a burden that is way too heavy to carry on one person if we look at it objectively. So we'd recommend that they change this. And soon after, you saw the Department of Labor increasing the time frame for paternity leave from 3 days to 10 days, which we still believe is really not enough, right? So you see that role. Additionally, the Commission plays the role of educating the public. And this has a two-pronged thing. So currently we are viewing diversity training in all spheres as really important, because we generally need to change mindsets that are historically placed in a diversive and segregated mindset, right? But we're seeing that new generations are also now taking up this mindset. So on one hand, we are doing the diversity training for adults, and then we're looking at children and saying, let's get into schools, let's change the mindset from that age. So by the time you're in a workplace, we don't have to come again and work on this diverse mindset that you need. So those are two of the ways in which the Commission is able to do that. The last is that when it fails, then we're able to go to court and take the different parties to court. And I think a misunderstanding in the country is that the private sector is not in any way obliged to respect the right to equality. And that's incorrect. We are able to take private sector companies to court when we see that there is unfair discrimination in the workplace. And sometimes it might be underemployment equity, but other days it's really just in the way you relate on a daily basis. Those are the three ways.
And just a follow-up question, I mean, to what extent have you been able to hold companies accountable? And how does that process work? Is it that you get complaints first from the public and then you take it from there? Or can you, on your own accord, look at what is happening in corporate South Africa and then identify discrimination and then take that up?
So we are empowered to take things on our own initiative, and we have done so on several occasions. However, we have also found that when we take companies to court, they are often happy to just pay their way out of the trap that they're in or the violation that they've caused. So our approach has been, yes, we can take you to court, but how about we sit down and discuss the gaps that are in your company and we change your policies and your practices on an ongoing basis. This is an approach that we used recently. A couple of years, you would have seen the Clicks adverts, a scandal where we saw the hair issue and the advertisements that were degrading to people across the board. We walked with Clicks. We said, Clicks, let's sit down, let's look at your policies, let's look at your advertising policies, and let's see how we can ensure this doesn't happen again. Failing that, there were still people who took them to court. And in the Equality Court, the court did find that they had not unfairly discriminated. And that's the thing. We can take you to court and it might not end up in our favor. But in the end, the outcome is we want to change. We don't want to see this thing happening. So we have taken an approach which is, let's go to court as a last resort. Let us sit down and engage. We've done several trainings across the board for Standard Bank, Accenture, where we're really just looking at what are the problems and how do we change them. We've trained executives, senior managers, to just ensure that they are familiar with what your obligations are. Even though you're in the private sector, it does not in any way remove those obligations.
And we are sitting with someone who has walked this journey. And I think what comes out from what Alan is saying is that because gender roles are socialized, right? These are constructs that are created by our cultures, where we come from in our communities. When people come into the workplace, they come with their socialization. Now, you as a leader in a company as big as yours, with the kind of impact that you have, how have you been able to, like Ellen is saying, through the company culture, sort of challenge some of that socialization about gender roles? And how are the women leaders in your organization then, sort of embraced? Are they accepted? Are they embraced? And what kind of challenges do they face as they take up these sort of generally seen as male roles? Because leadership is generally, most of our cultures is the purview of males, and that's the perception that people have, even though women do a lot of leading in our society.
Yeah, I think it is important that we acknowledge that this is such an important topic that it can't be relegated just to HR. In my view, the topic of diversity and inclusion should sit squarely in the office of the CEO, because that's where budgets gets allocated, that's where action gets, to be executed. So if it is a primary focus from the CEO, then we will make progress. I think one of the things that we've done is that I think in 2018, we set up the Women in CCBSA Forum so that women can talk to each other, irrespective of ranking. They can support each other. They can deal with issues that affect them. 2 years thereafter, we set up another forum for men. We call it Men of Honor, with a very clear creed of not every employee, you choose to be a member of that, provided you subscribe to the creed that is included there. And we talk about topics of, we don't talk about productivity. We don't talk about business issues. We talk about, by the way, I do believe if we don't capture the hearts and minds of our employees, they'll never be fully productive. So it's important that we do exactly that. So there we talk as men about what's our roles in families, what's our roles in reaching out to our counterparts. Why is it important to have women leaders? Because you're right, that's a social baggages or cultural baggages that we need to demystify and make sure that we address. We bring external speakers. And once a year, men and women forums get together now to address issues as a common, as a common platform. But I'm a very practical person. Mm-hmm. The biggest progress you make, it's when people see the numbers of women improving. Okay. So you can preach and you can talk, but if there is no change, people don't believe you. So we've had our former logistics director, in December she ran 1,000 trucks on the road, 500 forklifts, big budgets, women. In fact, not just women, black women. She's now in Ghana, she's the MD in Ghana. Our production facilities, you go to Midrand, the head of that manufacturing, it's a woman. The head of in PE, Kabeja, it's a woman. And in Devland, it's a woman. So manufacturing facilities, which are so-called, and they are producing excellent numbers. Evidence-based persuasion. So it's not just theory, it's to show them that, hey, these women are kicking results even much better than men sometimes. Mm-hmm. And they can see that when you put plant by plant KPI performance, they can say, oh, they are performing the same as every other person. So it's not an issue. And then we've got to review, we also do a lot of reviewing of our policies, that what are the small things that we need to be addressing and make. And I can make sure, I'll tell you, when we do performance reviews or salary reviews, I personally look at that. And it is easy to say, no, our salary practices are not discriminatory. Because a 2 rating gets this, a 3 rating gets this. But if you make all women 2 ratings, even the ratings then, which is the source, start becoming the source of that disparity. So I start by looking at, okay, the population of our workforce, how many women are at 2 ratings, how many at 3 ratings, and if it is skewed, what are we going to do to make sure that next year we don't have the same problem? Okay, what interventions do you put in place and so forth? On race, you do the same thing. By region, you do the same, because sometimes head office get more increases than the regional people. So you've got to analyze all of those things to make sure that there's parity and there's equity. I don't think we are perfect, but we've made huge strides. But it's about people beliefs, things they can see and touch, not that we just talk about.
And I love the point that it's also about meritocracy.
Yes.
It's not just about putting women as faces. This is not about fronting. It's about showing that women are productive as men. However, I think there is something else that I think Alan brought this out when he was talking, that we also need to be careful of just talking representation. without looking at the quality of what that actually achieves for women. I was with a women's group in the Eastern Cape who said it's quite interesting that we have more women in our council, but the issues that affect women in our community are still not reflected in what council decisions, what's coming out of council decisions. So in the same way, Janine, when you look at having women being represented in boards, we have made progress. I mean, you're seeing more and more women in boards. We are seeing more and more women in managerial positions. But how is that actually affecting the experiences of women in the workplace? Are we seeing that the issues of women and the barriers that they face, that by having representation, by having voices in positions of leadership, that some of those barriers are actually being overcome through that sort of activism at the higher levels? And if not, what needs to be done differently?
No, thank you. I think I love it that CEO is so practical with what's actually being done. So I'm going to follow your lead, CEO. I think we genuinely we still have a major issue. If you look at the sectors, if you look at what we used a word earlier on, we have to still fight for our place, whether it's in government, in corporate, or in rural areas. And that goes back to patriarchy. And, I come from a family that was extremely patriarchal. And my father didn't allow us as girls to have space and have a voice. We had no voice. And to the extent that he passed away in December, and I'm still dealing with the will, and I have to deal with an executor who tells us young girls what to do. And it's extremely painful that he never trusted his own daughters to help through the journey. So that goes back to patriarchy, and that because I was not born as a son, it was a disappointment in the family. So we do live with these real situations. Then we get into corporate and we get into government, and I've sat on boards that will make your hair turn grey of how I've been treated, how my fellow women colleagues have been treated. I mean, in one instance on a board, the first meeting, I was told to keep quiet recently, keep quiet and speak when you're spoken to. And I stopped the board meeting immediately. I was very blessed in one aspect, that the chairperson and the deputy chair were women. We stopped the meeting straight away and we dealt with it immediately. And I said, I'm not going to continue sitting on this board if we don't deal with this issue right up front. And we did. And you know what? For the next term, no problems at all. So I think that is what women, how we address these issues, it's not easy. But we can't have to fight every single day. If you can believe, and I can only speak from my point of view, but I've watched, and it's about inspiring our next generation to have that confidence. But you can't keep fighting. We need you guys. We need you to help us in those boardrooms, in the workplace, on the ground, because it is challenging. We want to dress beautifully when we come to work. We don't want to wear overalls all the time. So we might be a little bit sexy, but that doesn't mean you get to undress us with your eyes. And so these are real situations that we deal with, that I would like to be smart and whatever, but you'll notice me, I'm always covered up. And these are lessons that we have to learn as women in a workplace. But these are where we need to conscientize, through the commission to help work with men, to say, we are equals. There's no difference between you and I. We've got the same blood, Let us respect each other. Let us hear each other, and let us have a compassion for what we've also felt and grown and been through, because it's not easy in the boardroom. To this day, 2 years ago, I was working with a mining house, and I love working in tough, challenging environments because it inspires others. I was called a girly. I'm 58 years old. Hi, wena man. So these, can you believe it's here? A girly. Hi, wena. So this is when you realize that we do have a journey. And I kept quiet. Again, I waited for the meeting to finish, and I spoke to the gentleman afterwards, and I just said, that's out of line. Absolutely out of line. But a lot of the times we fear to be fired. We fear to be fired, number one. We feared if you're a consultant or advisory, you fear for your contract to be cut off. That's one thing. I'm so sorry, but those are issues that maybe why I have the privilege of being here today is I felt very strongly that equality is our freedom. And so we need to work together. And I really thank you for this platform. Thank you so much.
And I think it goes to the point again, and we tend to shy away from this issue of power dynamics. That when you talk about equality, the reason why we have to struggle as women is that we still don't hold power. The power still is in the hands of males. And unless we start to shift the mindsets, like you were saying, Hosea,
Yes.
and I want to just, for you to get into more detail about the work that you're doing with young men, is in shifting those mindsets. And I mean, how much more, I think, don't we need to do a lot more in terms of going down into our communities? Where the raising of children actually happens. We don't raise children in the workplace, We don't, our socialization doesn't take place in the workplace. It happens in our communities, it happens in our homes, with our families, it happens in schools. And so what is actually being done at that level, Hossein, and what do you think needs to be done, needs to be improved in terms of what's happening at those levels with the work that you're doing?
Yeah, fortunately, I've had the privilege of speaking to the Department of Basic Education led by the Minister, Angie Motshekga. They have now instituted a program called the Girls, Boys Education Movement, and it's right at the primary level. When I was interacting with them on behalf of the book, having been to universities, that came out strongly. That is a program that was instituted around 2020, and it has addressed the issue of age-appropriate language, because I wrote to a level of university students. But then the questions to them was, how far do we go in getting age-appropriate language if we have to address 7-8-olds? But they've got very good programs supported by an NGO in the Netherlands, which is very, very impressive. On the issue that Mr. Ratshefola has just raised, my book was launched at the University of Johannesburg, encouraged by Professor Marwala, who has instituted a men's forum. And on that basis, his wish was that that should be mainstreamed across all our institutions of higher learning. Unfortunately, on the route of going to do book launches at other universities, I found that that was also lacking. And there's also an issue of relegating this sensitive issue to, as Mr. Ratshefola says, to HR. Now, at universities, discussions on GBV is always relegated to social sciences, as if the guys who are doing mathematics and physical science are not involved as human beings. So that is an issue that is being addressed with the Minister of Higher Education, Blade Zemande. And I did raise this issue with him on the 31st of October when he was hosting a Women's Day, that all institutions need to have a men's forum where the men can discuss amongst themselves issues like how much should be coming from them as men to assist, eradicate these discriminatory practices. Because those are people, as we say, who are going to workplaces. They should not be confronted by these dynamics in the workplace. It should start when they have their 3 years of transforming their character.
And I think it's, as you say, I was a student in the social sciences all the way up until my master's degree. And interestingly enough, that's where we, learned about the Constitution, about human rights, etc. And you're right. I mean, the other counterparts in our other faculties did not get the same exposure. And coming back to you, Ellen, in terms of working again with the education departments, higher education as well as basic education. To what extent is human rights education a part of our curriculum? And is there work being done to mainstream that? Because I think we need to have that awareness from a young age. We shouldn't be introduced to gender equality as a human right when we are adults and attending forums like these.
Yes, so this is a key part of the Commission's work, like I've already mentioned. There's been about 3 initiatives that we've been working on over the last 7 years to ensure that we're educating at different levels and ensure that the department is educating at different levels. The first, at tertiary level, we had met with the chancellors of all of the universities in the country last year to discuss how we can establish a human rights education model at tertiary level that is compulsory for everyone. And currently the Commission is actually working with leading professors across the country to develop such a curriculum. So they're working hand in hand to give this curriculum to universities, because when we engaged with them, they said, look, we don't have the capacity to develop a human rights module. Can you assist us? So we put together a group of professors and they're working on producing such a module, which we are hoping will be compulsory for everyone across the board, even if it's just 1 semester, so that we can all have these discussions and understand the context of human rights even in the work that we're doing. The second part is including it into our schools' curriculums at high school level. Until now, it has not been part of our school curriculum. And what we did is we developed a subject or part of the life orientation subject that would focus on human rights alone. And that has been running for the last year, and we're still assessing how it has been piloted, its success, and where we need to improve. Again, that's not just a theoretical human rights learning, it's also the historical context and the need for why. Why do we have these things? Why do they have a place in our society, right? And the third is the human rights moot court competition that we have running currently. It is run by the Department of Basic Education, and we've become a big partner in this. In 2018, when we ran the moot court competition, the winners from South Africa won at a global level. And what we have brought to this is ensuring that the question that is asked is a human rights-based question, right? So that all these schools are engaging on a particular topic. I had adjudicated in this year's moot court process, which ended on Sunday. The finalists won on Sunday. The question was on the environment and companies that are littering or putting waste into the environment and how it has an impact on the community around them. So they had to find ways in which they could fight in a court from both sides, as a community and a company, to either defend as a company or to fight against the company, and give good constitutional arguments as to why a company cannot do certain things, right? Now, if you think of a 16-year-old and you at a 16-year-old level, do you recall being able to understand legal arguments like that, even though you weren't a lawyer, from a human rights basis, and be able to argue them to the extent that you're the best in the world? That's what we try and instill in our kids, so they have this broad and deep understanding of what the implication is. Previous questions have been race-based, gender-based, so we're trying to get that thinking going at the youngest level to the highest level. So there is a lot of work going on in that respect.
I think we can be hopeful. I think from this forum, we can definitely be hopeful that change is happening, that work is being done. We just need to improve on the pace, I think, of the changes. And just to remind us, we have an audience online, and the last 15 minutes is really dedicated to them. They're sending me questions. I'm going to be going to the questions now, and I welcome others who still have questions. Please do send them through. We are going to engage. There's a question here from Deboho, and this is directed to you, Velaphi, and it says, how has empowering women helped your organization?
It's a global fact that transformed, diverse, and inclusive organizations generally deliver 30% more productivity or performance than an average organization worldwide, because you are able to harness views and ideas that are diverse, that gives you a much richer ability to respond to your customers and consumers. I indicated to you that the majority of our customers, in terms of numbers, are women. So if you employ more women like we are doing, we are able to respond to the needs. When people that buy groceries for their households are generally women. Or if they send somebody, they'll determine what should be consumed at home. So if we bring women in our organization, we are able to address inwardly the requirements that our consumers really require. And quite frankly, women bring a particular precision, particularly in our hard fields, like engineering, logistics, warehouse. Their attention to detail, it's what gives us an edge to be. I think CCBSA is performing at a much better level than it used to perform in those hard fields as a result of the diverse leadership that we've got in the organization.
And Tebogo has a follow-up, and I think this is very educational for other companies. He's asking, how did CCBSA overcome malicious compliance? Because that's easy to do, you know, fronting is easy to do. So how did you get around that trap?
One of my weaknesses as a leader is that there's a concept called unfiltered information. I do read reports, but I don't trust them too much. Okay. I do walk the floor. I do talk to people. I talk to a cleaner. I speak to the production director. I speak to, you know, and I experience stuff. I've been told by many people things maybe that their bosses don't want me to hear. Just because by nature I'm quite accessible. It's very, very important that's why I said it must be owned from the CEO's office. It should not be just a lip service. If you have got a person, and we've dismissed people not on gender, but people that don't behave in terms of the values of the business, even if they are good performers, but if they don't live the values, they're not part of our organization. Yes, we'll encourage them, we'll develop them, we'll train them, we'll give them coaches, but if they've decided that they are not going to be in the bus of CCBSA from a value perspective point of view, thanks, they can leave the organization.
Wow, you're actually really putting your money where your mouth is. And do you put that into their contracts? You know, how do you get, you know?
The contracts are broad enough that somebody, if he is not compatible with the values and culture of the organization, so you will use the compatibility element. You know, I mean, we don't say in the contract, we will dismiss you if you are a racist. Okay. We don't say that. Yeah. But you know that if you are a racist, we'll do that. If you are a sexual harasser, we'll do definitely that. And in fact, I'll tell you a story. In one of our plants, we had a middle manager that was accused of harassing females, young females. And the case had gone through the process, through the HR and so forth, you know. So some of these managers are very smart. And the lady who's the victim wrote to me after her case had been thrown out. And I looked at it. I said, okay, let's leave this department HR out. We've got a lawyer at head office. I said, I want you to do this investigation for me. Just to tell you, the truth is that the person does not work for us anymore. So that's right. And by the way, when you do that, people see. They can see, and it's demonstrated, and they believe you.
Yeah. The perpetrator doesn't work for you anymore.
Yes.
Yes.
That's
The victim
brilliant.
was engaged.
Yes.
Yes.
She was about to leave us.
You see, that well done.
Yeah.
It's fantastic, CEO.
We have a lot to applaud here.
Yeah.
There's another question here that's to what extent are South African organizations supporting the Onramp problem for talented women who choose to pause their careers to prioritize family life and motherhood? And I think that's a good question. I mean, in as much as we are talking about gender roles, a lot of the care work falls on women. When it comes to children, raising children, when it comes to taking care of households, and sometimes the pressures can become overwhelming, and women are forced to choose between careers and their family life. And to what extent then are corporates, is the private sector creating an environment where women can accommodate both all the roles that they play in their lives? And I think I want to throw that at you, Janine, because you've worked across the board with different companies and different leaders.
I think there's been huge adjustments, and there's a lot more sensitivity, certainly in the workspace, specifically in the corporate space, huge adjustments, but you still, in the SMMEs, hear that adjustment has not been allowed. In fact, just yesterday, I had lunch with somebody that had come through the ranks as a chartered accountant, black chartered accountant, female leader, and she had to actually resign, have a baby, take the time off, and then choose a new job moving forward, because she said it was impossible to balance the two. Her new employment says, no problem, you need to go home, be with the baby, you need to be with a little 2-year-old, no problem, be with him, but I still need the job done. You know what I'm saying? So I think the understanding is there. We allow people to now work from home. I think COVID has done a bit of that shift, if I could say that. It's kind of forced us into, okay, we can work mobilely, no problem, and be mobile, no hassle. But we are still, I suppose, you got to walk in another person's shoes. I think what we've got to allow, maybe that's where the commission comes in with your training, is, you've never been pregnant, CEO. So you know what I mean?
I look the part.
No. But it is about, I suppose, if you haven't walked in the shoes, how do you then adjust it and be real? You see these tests on TikTok about, men going through period pains or experiencing this pain. I come from a bit of an era that the word pregnancy was never even allowed to be spoken in an open forum. Now it's an open forum. We talk about periods, we talk about period pain. So we are adjusting as a society, and I think social media has opened it up. But our leadership still needs to harness that and really live that. So where we can help people walk in other people's shoes, I would encourage it. I do think a lot in policy can be adjusted, and a lot more work is undoubtedly required. So the associations you're talking about need the sponsorship. They can't survive without sponsorship. And of course, it's been a challenge from an economic point of view. So the faster South Africa's economy wakes up, and we drive it as a South African nation, and I mean everybody that lives in South Africa, and we really open up the markets within Africa once again, these women's organizations and men's forums will become supported, sponsored. That's one of the things that broke down in the last 3-4 years, that the funds were just not there. So where we can harness, open that up, and then utilize those dialogue platforms to impact on policy directly in the workplace. So, yeah.
And I think, I'll come to Ellen just now. I think also the point is that when we begin to realize the value that women bring,
Yes.
we will try to be as flexible as possible in accommodating their situations. Ellen, you can come in there.
No, I just wanted to add briefly by saying that what COVID has shown us is that we're starting to see data on what the impact of the new approach to labor has been. So what we're seeing is that companies that are approaching a work-life balance as a priority are really growing in productivity, number one, but are also attracting more skilled women, right? So I don't want to mention the company, but one of the global leading insurance companies was one of the first companies to include flexible arrangements in their advertisements of positions. And they've seen a 15% rise in women applying for those positions. So you can see immediately the more you promote work-life balance, not only do you attract more women,
Yeah.
but your effectiveness increases, because now my mindset changes. When I come to work, I'm ready to work out of the fact that everything at home is taken care of, right? So now I can focus on being a productive person and doing what I love doing, right? So I think that's also a key component of seeing that there's also business sense and an outcome to prioritizing work-life balance as well.
And I think that's an important thing. We need to make the business case
Yeah.
for gender equality.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, what businesses are about making profits, they're about delivering to their shareholders. So it is important for us to make the case, the business case for it. I'm just going to read the last two comments here because we are close to the end of our conversation. One of the viewers has asked, what about remuneration? We speak of equality, but the pay differences between males and females doing the same work can be huge. This is also seen in sport. And then another comment says, change is happening and we appreciate it. It's the lack of support that is delaying the progress. We appreciate each and every one of you putting in the work. Now, this is a word of appreciation from the viewers who are listening right now. And I think, Velaphi, you have spoken to the issue of pay differences. And again, I think one of the takeaways is for me from what you've shared with us is that inclusion and equality need to be part of the business strategy. It's not something that you just, do haphazardly. And I think we can draw from the example you gave us about how it is that in CCBSA that you actually look at the inequality and the possibilities of skewing the scale and how it is that you attend to that issue. I'm going to give all of you just a minute to wrap up for us before we end the conversation. Let me start with Ellen and come this way this time around.
Okay, going to take a minute exactly. So just to quickly note on that this thing of equal pay is not a mirage. It's not coming out of nowhere. The CCMA reports that out of all of the complaints they receive on unfair discrimination, equal pay for equal work is the highest. Second to that is sexual harassment, right? So this thing of equal work, equal pay needs attention. And one of the ways to deal with it is through transparency. So let's be transparent about the different pay levels we have, and let's discuss how we can equalize them where they are different. I find a lot of black women leaving corporate jobs because they have found out that someone who's doing the same job is earning twice as much as them. And that is audacious for them, so they leave, right? That's the one thing. Then before I wrap up, I wanted to quickly just note the issue of harassment. Sexual harassment is quite a step. But harassment is defined as when someone uses, or let me actually read it, unwanted conduct which is persistent or demeans, humiliates, or creates a hostile, intimidating environment, right? And is calculated to create submission, induce submission. That's just harassment. Forget the sexual component, right? So I think we also need to understand that harassment exists and how to deal with it outside of the sexual harassment itself too. So as a final word, I think I would like to express, obviously, that the Commission is there to deal with issues that relate to unfair discrimination. We do take people to the Equality Court and we represent people in the Equality Court for free. So people are welcome to approach the Commission on all of its different platforms.
Thank you so much, Alan.
We'll see.
Yeah, thanks for the forum. I would like just to bring an element that is sweeping especially the US and overseas in terms of what they refer to as bystander intervention. In cases of abuse, where they say each and every one of us has a role to play, especially men. There is an element of, yes, looking after your safety. If you have to report something else in a workplace, it should never be left to the CEO or to the manager. Each and every one of us has to acknowledge that there is a role that you can play. You can raise that up, or you can address the discriminatory act at this point in time. So the message to each and every one of us, we are being called to come and carry this burden with us everywhere we go and every day.
Thank you so much, Josiah. Janine?
You know, this is a huge topic. And this hour's gone through so quickly, and I thank you. I think at the end of the day, every single one of us have got to play a role. Equal pay has got to come from the top. It's not such a difficult thing. You just need one person. One person in sport, one person in government, one person in corporate, one SMME to say, do it. And I did it in my company. I ran my company for 18 years, and I made it very clear. Everybody was equal in this company. Equal pay and equality. And I think leaders just need to have the courage. So authentic leaders, it's tough. So one has to have the courage. Step out of the box. Don't worry about other people. You know what's right. Do what you know is right. And I think we've reached that stage. And I think, at the moment, if we look at football, well, our Banyanas have done pretty well there. So, how on earth can the other team that ain't doing so well be paid more? Hey, wait a minute, something is wrong with this picture. Yeah. So we just correct it there quickly, and I think a lot of the society will be a little happier. Yes, I think people will blame it on airtime and whatever. Well, already we've had stats now starting to show on airtime, TV, radio, that guess what? Women's sport is undoubtedly been followed. So those stats are shifting already. So we need courageous leadership. One CEO to stand up, a leader, a board, a chair to say, I'm on this board now, I'm the CEO, and I stand for this, and ensure that it's trickled down. And I think CEO here has made an incredible practical example of how you integrate it into your everyday impact on the bottom line.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Janine. And the last word comes to you, Velaphi.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the session. I was born of a single parent who's my mother. She shaped me, and very poor backgrounds shaped me to the person that I am. So I know what women are capable of. I've got 3 children, 2 girls, 1 boy. I don't want any of them never to reach their full potential just because of their gender. It will make me so sad that they did not reach their full potential just because they are women or they are black. It's such a sin when they can contribute so much to companies, to organizations, and to this beautiful country of ours. Mm. That's what I want to contribute towards, to contribute to a fairer, better South Africa and Africa as a whole.
Thank you so much. And I just want to say thank you so much to the panel. You were fantastic in helping us navigate a very complex issue, very sensitive issue. And I think you have brought out a sense of hope, and optimism that we are doing the right things. And if we keep doing the right things, we will make progress. And this is a whole of society issue. It's not just something that can be tackled just by business leaders and political leaders. We all need to get behind this. And just finally say this, gender should not be a barrier to us reaching our full potential. Doesn't matter what our backgrounds are, where we come from, who we are, gender should not be a barrier. But as it is, because of the power imbalances in our society, it's something that we still need to struggle for. So aluta continua. Thank you so much to Business Day Dialogues, and thank you so much to Coca-Cola Beverages South Africa for hosting this very important conversation. We will see you next time. Thank you.